My buddy Jonathan Hutton from Outkick is out there. What's up, man? How you been?
Nuno, I'm great, man. Yeah, you're welcome back to Nashville anytime you want, man. Red carpet rolls out for TexAgs, that's for sure. And anything you guys need, we're always here. And bring everybody. Let's go. I've been to College Station. I need to open the doors to Broadway.
Well, let's do it. So I don't know how you take in that game that we saw on Saturday, because if you're a Tennessee fan, you're like, dude, if A&M had a capable offense, we lose this game, and we lose it significantly. If you're A&M, it's like, here we go again. Same kind of deal. So just what was your big takeaway from Saturday?
Well, being here in the mid-state, for me, it's just that we saw Josh Heupel and Tennessee win a game where they didn't have to score 30. That's the first time I've seen Heupel do that as a head coach. That's number one. It was I felt like the winner of that game, see if you agree, is a 9-win team.
Yep.
And the loser could be at 7. And this, for Tennessee, this season is representing the floor, the base of what I think Josh Heupel is capable of as head coach. And my co-host Chad Withrow coined that in the preseason. And I agree with him now that we're here, because Milton has been good, not great. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't really taken over the way Hooker did. And they're still finding ways to win some games. And case in point was this past Saturday. I don't know. Clay has said that he felt like it was two programs passing in the night. I don't know if that's the case yet, but it was a significant win despite how that game played out for the Vols. And meanwhile, now you're looking at road trips to Ole Miss and, correct me if I'm wrong, LSU.
Yep.
And that's a steep hill now. And now, because you didn't win that game Saturday, the Aggies are thinking, okay, what happens at the end of the year? Because it's not if you lose, it's how you lose in many cases. And coming into a season where there's a lot of pressure and a lot of money for a buyout, I would have said, no, they're not. Jimbo's staying. And I don't know where you come down on that, but there's still a lot of football to be played to determine that. And again, it goes back to, it's not if you lose, it's how you lose. And losing on the road is not a great sign, especially from that game in Knoxville.
Losing on the road, it's been 2 years since you've won on the road. You've got to go to Ole Miss, where Lane Kiffin right now has your number. You haven't won in Baton Rouge since 1994. Like, there's it, and it's exactly what you just said. There's how you lose. And the way this team loses is they find different ways to lose. Special teams, like offense scores 3 points in 3 straight second halves. Like, it's just, and everything you thought about this offense that you saw early. Look, I know there's going to be a drop-off from Connor to the next guy, and I think Max is a good quarterback, but it shouldn't be that steep of a drop-off.
Especially for a guy with experience, Like, I was in Tuscaloosa when Max Johnson, this was 2 years ago, went on the road, and there's no way that LSU should have hung in that game against the Tide that night. And they did. It was a sloppy game, thanks to Bama. But Johnson was making plays. Here's the thing: he wasn't losing games, but that's what you want in a guy that's not the starter, right? You're right. You're going to have a drop off. There's been a drop off from Hooker to Milton, and but not one that's losing games for them. The Vols, when they've lost, they've played one really bad half of football. For A&M, you're right. There's just a different way that you can point to, and it's still a talented roster. That's what I look at. So, and I was high on the Aggies to begin the preseason. Whenever we last chatted, I felt like they were the surprise team, and surprising everyone, but there in College Station, because we weren't talking about them. It's very similar to the way we weren't talking about Kentucky going into this year or last year, for that matter. I'm still indifferent on the direction of the program, because I saw what happened during the COVID year, which is very impressive. They should have been in the playoff that year. And from there to now, it's been quite the journey. And I don't know. I can't really pinpoint one exact area as to why they've fallen the way they have when they should be a lot better. And Jimbo's resume, it speaks for itself, but the resume currently is not all that great.
Jonathan, how did Tennessee become this defensive juggernaut? Like that front, man.
They're top 25 in that area. They've got Pierce now who can rush the passer. It's bizarre because they've kind of flip-flopped on the offensive efficiency versus what they're doing defensively. And it starts up front, and the juggernaut is, you've got to string together some games, but it starts with exactly that, and they've done that now. The mentioned Jimbo's resume, Tennessee's defensive resume is good. They've allowed less points than Alabama has allowed. They matched up this week. I still want to see more to truly believe it, but they're aggressive on the edges, and their pass rush has been good. And they're very stout. They fight. They battle in the trenches. And it still goes back to it. In this league, that's how you win games in the SEC. You still pinpoint what's going on at the line of scrimmage. Tennessee's been winning that battle. And for the most part, they've been able to run the football well when they want to. And while they lack the receiving playmakers that they had a year ago, they're getting enough in that area to be consistently on the winning side of things. So they play well off their defense, which is something that was not the case last year. The Bama-Tennessee matchup from last year to this year, I feel like is exactly the other side of the coin. It's the old school Bama-Tennessee game instead of what we saw last year, which was one of the best football games I've ever seen.
So can Tennessee score enough on the road to beat Alabama, considering Joe Milton hasn't been bad, but they can't. He's inaccurate, man.
I'm telling you, man, you're right. He's inaccurate and inconsistent in that area. He is also capable of having the game of his life. Like I feel like he does that every preseason, every camp, where he has the practice week of his life. And Heupel, I mean, he beat out Hooker the first time. And it was because he came in and in 17 days just was rolling, and the athleticism is there. He's got to have a lot of help around him. Like they just need to have a perfect, crisp day offensively. But Milton is capable of that. And if he plays his top game, Tennessee's going to win that game. Now, I'm not betting on that. I've seen enough of Joe Milton to know that you'll take just consistent and very good, not great, over trying to decide whether or not which game he's going to have, because there's no rhyme or reason to it. But he's certainly capable of leading a team for a week. Is it this week? Probably not, based on the fact that this is a game that Saban preps for weeks in advance. The Tennessee book is always on his desk anytime he's doing some sit down with a media member. Yeah, I think they have a way of confusing, bogeying, disguising that he may not see at other SEC programs for the most part on the SEC East schedule. I think in this case, they do some confusion for him, and we'll see how he plays. Defensively, though, Tennessee's been good, and Bama's offense, if they're going to move the football, eventually they're going to have a penalty that brings it back, because that's how the roll tide, the tide rolls, right? Like 14, 15 penalties a game is now the routine, and that's also bizarre saying that from a Saban coach team. But they've been doing that. Do they have the quarterback to bail them out? Milroe's been good since he was benched. I'm still not sold on that either. This is just which quarterback is capable of raising the game a bit. Is it Milroe or Milton? And to me, that's a coin flip. It should be a good game like last year. I think it's tight, but it's low scoring.
I don't watch Milton close enough to know this side of him, but it seemed to me when he got out and ran, he took great pride in making contact with the A&M defenders, where he would talk a little smack. Is that typical of him?
Yep, and he's got the size to kind of wear it, right? First game I saw him play at Neyland was the season opener for him, first start, and he wasn't shy to contact, but the way he took hits, he allowed the defender to bring the contact first. Like he took the brunt of it. And I think he's, over the last year or so, changed that physical nature of how he runs. He's built. I mean, he's a big guy. He's not Cam Newton, but he's that same size and build and frame. So I think that benefits him, and they want to get him on the move. But they also want him to stand in the pocket and be fast with the football. And they need to, when they need to go fast, sometimes this year I feel like they've gone slow. And when I feel like they're going fast, there are times where I'm like, slow it down a bit. And it's been a bit of a hodgepodge to figure out this group. But I think in part that's personnel that Heupel's having to adjust to, and a new offensive coordinator for that matter. But so far, things have gone about as expected with Milton, where it's not a Heisman type candidacy, but it's also not just a complete drop off from what they had. And part of that is just he's running, and he's also lowering the shoulder or bending down and delivering the hit. Hooker was the opposite. Hooker was also a very good runner, but he knew when to get down. Milton more or less wants to invite the contact.
As we know, college football changes week to week, and the sky's falling, yada yada yada. LSU, their season looked like it was going to go one direction, and it feels, at least right now, that the arrow is pointing back up. Do you think the arrow is pointing back up?
I do. There's a scenario where they get to 9 wins. They're guaranteed, I believe, 7 now. And that's with I think they split the 4 games that they have coming up in some general fashion. They've got Missouri and Kentucky, but also Bama and Georgia. And of course, Vandy as well. I think they get to 7 there. And then can they, with Vandy and then their non-conference UConn, can they get 2 more games of those 4 and then possibly win a 10th in a bowl game? That is coming off of an 11-win season, that's great for Heupel in recruiting. He's been doing well in that area. They develop talent well. They know who they are and what they're about. There's a buy-in there. There's no disconnect between the program and the offices to what they're doing on the practice field or what they're doing on game day. I like the direction that they're headed. They're on that path. And there hasn't been a considerable amount of adjustment, so to speak, because they have some young guys stepping up, especially defensively.
What game are you going to have your eyes on this week, and maybe outside of the SEC? Ohio State, Penn State, Texas, U of H. Where are you leaning?
Yeah, Texas is very intriguing because I want to see. To me, Texas, Oklahoma, they're going to have a rematch, and the winner gets in the playoff because I think both teams meet there. And then I just feel like the conference championship games are going to have a more weight to them than usual, than past years. But yeah, it's Ohio State, Penn State, only because it's not ticket prices are absurd, but they're always absurd in Columbus. I don't really know the Big Ten right now. The top 3, and then there's a considerable drop off from 4 to 12. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, where do we slot the top 3? And Ohio State's not the same team; they're very beatable. Penn State, if this is if James Franklin's going to have a staircase climb, this is the year to do it. And they've done it on the road as much as they possibly could with Aller, and I'm intrigued to see the matchup there. And they'll have to do it on the road here. And then Michigan has been dominant. I'm not taking anything away from them. Are they one of the top 4? Absolutely. Have I seen a lot of them? No. I mean, because of their schedule. So it takes a while. We got to wait for a few more weeks for that to play out. So this determines kind of the pecking order of Michigan and then who's the next team. And then Michigan will have to end up proving it too. I also think Penn State, Ohio State, if everyone splits and everybody has 1 loss by the end of it with Michigan and the other 2, I'm intrigued to see what happens in the conference championship game with that versus what could happen in the Pac-12. So, yeah, the magnitude of the win-loss here is big, just like it was for USC losing to Notre Dame.
So Billy's giving me a hard time for using Texas and U of H as the game that I used. And I'm looking through. There aren't a lot of marquee games, but the one I probably should have gone with was Duke and Florida State.
Florida State, to me, I still have them in my top 4. Washington is cracking away. They're chipping away at the resume for Florida State now. And that's just in my own head trying to piece together what I think the committee will do. Brock Bowers going down And the assumption is he's coming back in a few weeks. I don't know why Brock Bowers would come back, given the fact he's a two-time national champion. But that is a huge loss for Georgia, and that opens up the landscape too, not just in the SEC, but for teams trying to compare themselves to the top of the college football world. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the impact of college football in general. Duke is a great one because Duke is far more talented than just a quarterback, and certainly capable of beating Florida State. But Florida State just needs to stay right on track. What a huge loss for Miami, by the way, a couple of weeks ago. And North Carolina, I'm not sleeping on Drake May. Just continue doing what they're doing and see what happens at the end of the line. The ACC is intriguing because they're kind of the outlier for all of the great storylines right now in college football, because we're not going to see the top teams play each other for a bit.
Jonathan, I appreciate you. Got to hit a break there, man. Thanks so much.
Okay. Always great, man. Anytime. Thank you.